this video, you'll be watching an excerpt from our Revit intro class. The topics we'll be covering include view scale, level of detail, visual style, and thin lines. There is a view control bar down at the bottom of your screen, kind of bottom left. Whoops. So down here are the view control buttons. We're going to go over these three: the scale, the level of detail, and the style. So those are the three we're going to focus on right now. There's an additional button, and this one is at the top of your screen. It's called thin lines. So up here, when the button is blue, it's on. When the button is gray, it's off. And so when it's on, all lines display as thin lines, but this does not affect the way it plots, the way it prints. It's still going to print with the object styles. We'll go over object styles in a little bit. When that button is off, object line weights as set in object styles will be displayed. So certain lines will be thicker, certain lines will be thinner. And when you're working, sometimes it's easier to just look at the thin lines. It's easier to snap to objects when you're just looking at thin lines. All right, so let's start off in the first floor plan. So I'm double clicking on first floor under plan views or floor plans. And then I'll zoom in a little bit. Okay. And so let's test that thin lines button. At the top of your screen, look for that thin lines button. There's also a shortcut. TL is a shortcut to turn it on and off. So when I click that button and it's gray, I can see that the outline of the walls are thicker. The design on the inside of the wall is thinner. The text is thicker. Right, so there's different line weights. This kitchen has things on the inside that are thin lines, but again, the walls have thicker lines. The windows have more thicker lines. So there's different line weights, and those line weights are coming from object styles. On the Manage tab of the ribbon, over on the left side, we have Object Styles. Go ahead and click on Object Styles. So here's Object Styles. There are different tabs. So there's Model Objects, Annotation Objects, Analytical Objects, Imported Objects. Let's focus on Model Objects. So the Model Objects, these are the different categories of objects, and they are assigned different line weights. So projection, I believe, is when you're looking down or looking straight at the object from the outside. Cut is if it's in a section view or in a plan view, because this is like cutting a horizontal section through the building. So cut has a different line weight. And then there's line colors that are assigned to the different objects, line patterns that are assigned to the different objects. So object styles are similar to layers, right? Instead of us manually creating layers, Revit already has these preset categories. I'm going to scroll down. So these are all preset categories. You cannot rename them. You cannot add or remove them. So for example, there's a category for walls, and then that wall has already been set. Well, these can be changed if you wanted to, but this name cannot. So the walls have already been set to a line weight of 2 or a line weight of 5, depending if it's a projection or a cut. And then it has a line color of black. It will print black, and it's a solid line, right? And then there are certain objects that have materials assigned. This is just a default wall material. Yes, you can change these settings. What does number 1 mean? What does number 2 mean when it comes to these line weights? I'm going to cancel. And again, I think there's a slide on this, but I'll just mention it now. On the Manage tab of the ribbon, there's a button for additional settings. In here, you can see the different line styles. Line styles are dashed versus solid versus different ones, right? And you can see the different line weights. So let's take a look at line weights. So again, the program already comes with these preset line weights. Yes, you could change them, but most people, I would say, just use what's given. So for example, we're looking at model line weights. A line weight of 1 means different things depending on the scale of your drawing, the scale of your view, the scale of your viewport. So for example, if I'm using 1/8 inch equals a foot as my scale, a line weight of 1 will print at 0.003 inches. If I'm using a line weight of 3, it's going to print at 0.008 inches, right? So all these different line weights depend on the scale that you're using. And so yes, you can add, you can delete, you can change, but again, most time I would say people just pick from this list. That's probably the easiest method. So when I have thin lines turned off, I am seeing that line weight. If I were to change the scale down at the bottom left of your screen, I'm currently at 1/4 inch equals a foot. If I change that to 1/8 inch equals a foot, see how it gets a little bit thicker. If I change that to 1/2 inch equals a foot, it gets a little bit thinner, right? So it depends on your scale. I'll go back to 1/4. And then if I use the thin line button, I'm going to use thin lines to turn that off. Every single line, I mean, when you're zoomed out, it looks more bold, but when you're zoomed in, you can see every single line is a thin line now. It has the thinnest line weight. This thin line button does not affect the way it prints. It only affects the way you see it in CAD or in Revit. So view scale, I showed you how view scale affects the line weights. I want you to now focus on these annotations, the text, the dimensions. Go ahead and change your scale again. Change it to, let's try 3/16 equals a foot. The text got more larger, right? Let's change it to 1/2 equals a foot. Yep. So this annotation scale changes the scale of the view. So we're seeing that it changes the size of the text, right? I'm going to go back to 1/8. No, I think we were at 1/4 initially. Let's go back to 1/4. So I think this was the original size that we started with. I want to show you how it doesn't only affect the text and dimensions and line weights, it will also affect your viewport on the sheet. So this floor plan has been placed onto one of the sheets. This is my sheets. And I can look through and see that the floor plan, first floor, was placed onto A2. So I'm going to double click on the sheet A2. And it looks great because I'm back to my original scale. But if I double click into the viewport, when I'm inside the viewport, it's all black lines, but everything around it is grayed out. That's how I know I'm inside the viewport. If I change the scale now, I'll try 1/8. Notice how, yes, it changed the text height. Yes, it changed the line weight, but look at how it also scales that viewport, right? So this scale not only changes annotation and line weight, it also changes the size of the viewport. So I'm going to go back to 1/4. Okay, so knowing that, be careful. Once you've placed a view onto a sheet, don't mess with the scale in the original view. It will affect the way it looks on the sheet. To get out of the viewport, double click outside of it and everything else becomes black again. And that's how you know you're now just in paper space. CAD Masters offers online and classroom training for a variety of Autodesk software. For more information, go to www.cadmasters.com or give us a call at 925-939-1378. So the next one was level of detail. Let's go back to the first floor plan view. Once you're in the first floor plan view, zoom into the walls. Any wall is fine. So I'm looking at these walls. And notice how you can see some squiggly lines, kind of like a hatch pattern inside that wall. Down at the bottom next to the view scale, there's like a little checkerboard button. that's level of detail. And if you hover your cursor over any button, it'll tell you the name of that button. And this one actually tells me I'm using level of detail medium. Go ahead and click that button. There are 3 levels of detail that could be possible for any model object. I'm not saying they're always going to be using 3 different levels, but 3 are possible. So let's switch to coarse. Okay, so if you're looking at the coarse level of detail, and let me turn off thin lines for this, you'll see that it's just an empty outline of a wall, right? A hollow outline of a wall when we're in the coarse level of detail. When we switch it to the medium level of detail, that's when we see the hatch pattern inside, or if there's different layers to the wall, you might see the different layers of that wall. And then in this particular project, when I switch it to fine, nothing really happens, but there are other scenarios. Like, I know it's not in this project, but if I go to 3D and I kind of zoom into this door, there are certain doors where when you go from coarse to medium to fine, different pieces of the door will show up. And in the fine level of detail, a doorknob shows up. All right. We could try it in 3D. So if you're in this 3D view, try coarse, see if it looks any different. So it looks like the ground lost the hatch pattern and the coloring. And then medium, now I can see the hatch pattern and the coloring. And fine, I don't know if anything's going to show up. Yeah, I don't really see a difference when I'm set to fine. But definitely your drawing will run faster if you're set to coarse. There's less detail, less things for it to generate. So coarse will let it run faster, especially when you have a large project. I'll stick to medium because I want to see this nice earth pattern there. And then the third button is visual style. This one makes a big difference. So I'm in the 3D view. We're going to test out the different visual styles. I'll click that little box button. We'll start with wireframe. So wireframe shows you the outline of the objects and you can see through the objects. Let's try a wireframe on the first floor. So going back to the first floor plan. Let's see if we have a different look when we go to wireframe. So I'm switching it to wireframe. I can see through the floors and I can see the walls in the basement. Then I switch it back to hidden line. Hidden line shows the outline of the object, but you cannot see through anything. Let's go back to the 3D view, switch the 3D view to hidden line. And so again, you're just seeing a basic outline, but no transparency. You cannot see through these objects. So typically when you print, you're printing something with hidden line. Okay, let's switch it to shaded. Shaded shows the material colors, the material patterns. Switch it to consistent colors. So consistent colors also shows the material colors and patterns. The difference between shaded and consistent colors has the same color no matter what side of the object you're looking at. Shaded has a sun somewhere. And so one side of the object may look darker and the other side of the object may look brighter, depending on where the sun location is. So when I'm working in 3D, I like consistent colors. I don't care about the shading. I just want all the material colors to show. So other than that one, the last one is called realistic. I don't use realistic very often. It shows what a rendering would look like, and it would really slow down your model. But go ahead and try it on this small house here. So pick realistic. And it takes a minute to actually generate that look. And there it is. So you can see the grass has texture, the plants look realistic, the car looks realistic. There's a person here. You can see that person. You have the bricks, the shingles. And so every material that you assign has pretty much an image that is stored with that material. And then that image is just kind of copied across the surface of each of these objects. So again, it's a nice preview to what you would see in a rendering, but if you have a large project, it's going to slow down that project. Right. So for 3D, I typically recommend consistent colors. So you'll see the plants and the person and the car are just like looking like a paper cutout almost. CAD Masters offers online and classroom training for a variety of Autodesk software. For more information, go to www.cadmasters.com or give us a call at 925-939-1378.